Good evening and welcome to Cafe Muse's October readings. We have really an exciting program for you tonight. We have I'll be hosting, and a special guest host, David Keplinger. Our two poets, Majda Gama and Alina Stefanescu, are marvelously paired. They are poets split and divided between two countries, Majda from Saudi and now Virginia, and Alina from Romania and Alabama now. So if time permits, Karen will host a brief Q&A after the readings. If you have difficulty hearing the poets, click the gray box at the bottom of the chat, and it'll say CC, and that'll bring up the closed caption function. We've muted your microphones to ensure uninterrupted readings. Before we get started, we encourage you to buy the poets' books. We'll put links to purchase the books in the chat, as well as a link to donate to help keep Cafe Muse going. And now, please welcome David Keplinger to introduce Majda Gama. David is the author of 11 collections and the director of the MFA program at the American University. Welcome, David.
Hi, Renee. Thank you so much for inviting me in to introduce my friend Majda Gama. Poets forge gold out of the ordinary lead of this world. It's left to poetry to remind us there's gold to be found inside everything that's happened, everything that can happen. The alchemists need only see gold where others see mortality and loss, absurdity and separation. And of course, the gold I'm speaking of is of a spiritual nature, like paradise is. Itself, not so much a place or a notion, but a state of mind, a manner of looking at and being with things. It's fitting then that the call of paradise, Majda Gama's new chapbook, should begin with a passing through a gate in which we enter, quote, a world stripped of its old gods. It's a world being burned down in the pan, set on fire before our eyes, whose philosopher's stone is the sheer holiness of words. The call of paradise, the call to cross into the world and be captured by it, comes always with a feeling of distance and dissonance. Prayers are flung up through the door of the sky. They disappear or flutter back down unanswered. From origin to destination, the call exists in two realms at once, then and now, there and here, an east world of old hierarchies and myth, and a west world of alienation and self-reliance. I carry the east with me, Majda writes. I carry it west. The east calls to the west calls to the east, each their own paradise, each on opposite sides of the gate. This book is no binary comparative study, I've discovered. There's hardly a statement about any place in the world that isn't complicated or synthesized or reconceived. And I've followed Majda's poetry for over a decade now. The subjects are familiar to me. In the Hall of the Mountain King offers a touching elegy that maps the father's origins, quote, in a city of old rooftops sprawled across 7 hills, unquote. And we meet the grandmother who speaks of the past in minarets, Beirut, early 21st century, taking up her holy place at the center of the frenetic, modern lives of her descendants. Majda sketches her family's origins as she drafts her own maps of the self, the influence of punk, the hold of the Bronze Age artifact on the imagination, the rapture of dreams of native gardens. In her poetry, stories are alive and must be kept alive. Their little boxes must have holes for breathing. The gold of the call of paradise doesn't come from a distant sun. It's not made only of the past. It's not made solely of the present. It's not made of the East. It's not made of the West. It's an alloy of ingredients. The land of the father's burial is, quote, a land none of us are from. What do we know? What's true? What is the result of loving attention? Real questions like these are unanswerable. Where do I come from? Where am I going? Meanwhile, the land and our bodies are somehow being consecrated by each other in this book. The truth is doing some intimate work on us while we are mostly unaware. The call of paradise is a call to be captured the way words capture those of us who know their transformative power. The call is a disappearing act where the body becomes a door to its own death. In the final poem, Arabian Safari, in a desert conservation zone, the speaker, quote, holds up a gloved hand for a gyrfalcon and asks herself why she came to meet the desert with a bare face, without gifts, she writes. Meeting the holy when it comes, we're often unprepared to see ourselves as we really are. Majda Gama's poetry, at its most arresting, brings me back to my aliveness. At any turn, I could meet something spectacular here. This life is all I need to know of ancient Dilmun, of Eden. It's always close at hand. It's always almost here. Please join me in welcoming this wonderful, talented poet, Majda Gama.
Thank you so much, David. I really hoped I wouldn't get choked up, but I am. These words are everything. And thank you for providing opening text to the chapbook too. I write in my own acknowledgments that I live well in the house of poetry because of you. And it's true. This book probably exists because of you. Sure. You helped me forge the gold in the alchemist's pan. Let me put it to you that way. Thank you as well to Cafe Muse for having me, Renee for hosting, Henry, Karen, Luther, Ellen, and Claire. Thank you, Alina, Stefanescu, for being a part of tonight's reading. I simply love Dor and your poetry, your tweets, everything. Truly, she is like poet laureate of Twitter. She's been a part of my everyday life for so long, and she's an extraordinary poet, and I'm very excited to hear her read. I'll start with the first couple of poems in my chapbook, The Call of Paradise, and go on a little journey from there. Pastoral in the Anthropocene. You've walked through the open gate of your country hotel, accompanied by moths and a spectacular air blowing across the night damp grass. It is twilight, yet all the silhouettes make sense. The hour full of dogs walking with their humans. White hairs pause on the edge of dark vision. They allow your passage and stand still. You thank them for not seeing you as predator, as stoat, fox, or kite. Across the road is a field felled of a tree. Crows still flock to its absence for shelter in the indistinguishable night. Quiet they sit with is the quiet of a world stripped of its old gods, that the world should end like this. This next poem I'm going to read is dedicated to friends of mine that I've had in my life, probably since middle school in Virginia, called Brood X 2021. It's basically about my generation, Generation X, but it's also about that summer during the pandemic when the cicadas came back. And it was the most exciting thing around town, wasn't it? Because everything was shut down due to the pandemic. But also we realized that, this was maybe our third cycle of cicadas together. On a midnight walk together, I pull ahead a few paces and turn to watch the people I knew walk with the people I know now. 30 years ago, we were propelled down the neighborhood street by a repetitive bass line pounding from a basement party we needed a breath from. Tonight, we leave our masks behind to move closely again as cicada wings stroke in the canopy. Dara is showing us how the headlamp she wears illuminates the leaf litter and places it on my forehead so I can see how the light we each carry is alive in the eyes of everything looking back at us. And this next poem has a fairly long title, and it was very therapeutic for me to write. It's called When It Is Implied by a Woman Not From My Country That I Am Not From My Country. How old were you when you learned to tie your scarf? And why do you ask if my hijab is still black? In the desert, Ibrahim points to a baby camel, 1 day old. The females are turned loose into the desert to give birth. There are 2 kinds of gazelle, Reem and Dhabi, but one oryx, Maha. Some of these are the names of girls I grew up with. The hudhud has flown west. A bulbul sits at my closed window. If I open myself with the glass, will it fly in? The food I carry from country to country, the sand trapped in the soles of shoes, currency I never can convert. So, thank you. This next poem is a Raza with a little bit of a punk rock center. I had to do it. It's forthcoming in Plowshares, and I still can't believe that they're taking this piece, but hey, I guess they have good taste. East-West. I carry the East with me. I carry it to the West. Wrap it in layers in a small suitcase tagged for the West. In America, there is a romance that calls for leaving known people and places to head for the West. I open my suitcase and stare at shoes that leak sand. Oh, I mourn not having red sand dunes to walk in the West. In the 1980s, I inhaled California through sun-in and suntans, wanted woods that were red, the West Coast of hippie squats and beat cities, punk bands, Penelope Spheres filmed in the decline of Western civilization, Part 1. Yes to crime, Exene, Darby Crash, Alice Bag, the Roxy, the Mask. The West is the best, sang Jim Morrison to me in my eastern bed by a Walkman. I believed in his highways that led west. Days of light cycle into nights of light. I saw LA and felt wed, bride of many cities, daughtered by the East, mothered by the West. Minarets, Beirut, early 21st century. Thank you. On the Christian side of town, there is no adhan. We speak like the tiles on a minaret during prayer call, like the sympathy of strings in my grandmother's ode that she put down to bear her children. In Beirut, I last saw her alive. She ate nothing and spoke of Byblos in the 60s, when she saw Feiruz sing in the ruins of the Roman amphitheater. She wants to hear how I live my life in Amrika and Am I Mabsuta. In the pastel light, hours pass over our tongues like sugared almonds. I just want to say before I keep going that it's really wonderful to have the poetry community that has carried me through my life writing all here. There are so many wonderful people here. It's too much to be born. I joked that I would read also from the poems of Suzanne Summers, Touch Me, but I'm not going to do that, but I just wanted to let you know that I have it with me. I am a serious poet, so I'm not going to read it. I'll keep reading my own poems. But it does exist, and it's worth, I suppose, checking out. Okay, this poem is called 3 Doorways. 1. The one your mother held open for you was the first door, and it cannot be remembered but by her. That story builds over time. It was a swift birth, or waters broke at sunrise on equinox, or the head stuck in the canal until sunset. Her door opened for you. You arrived. 2. There was a doorway in Taif in our old summer home. My father pictured there in his birth room. A lintel above him of pierced woodwork, tinted turquoise to turn away jealous eyes. Eyelids closed to his image, his memory, then open. The door of the soul begins him again. When my sister was born, I asked to name her Layla, after the nighttime that beckoned me from my father's doorway. He wanted the name of his sister who lived an unfulfilled life. The weight of a name rose and fell in conversation. I wanted the letters of 2 languages to hold her in place. I'll read just 2 more poems. I guess I'm doing fine. Is it really 7:42? Am I reading too fast? Okay. I just see smiling faces. That's good. Elegy with precious oil. Now I am told to wear white, as white is not only the color of mourning, it is also fashionable. I will wear a white scarf, even amongst women, for my hair is black and pink, which is not yet acceptable. I hope the neon pink burns through the Damascus cotton, lights up the receiving room with the heat of grief I hold for my father, who also wore white. Last I saw him, he was wrapped in a shroud, layered in herbs. He smelled like our land does at daybreak when the sand is scented with the dew of morning flowers. White too, the jasmine and gardenia, the smoke of incense burned for the dead, carried through the room to cast out bad spirits. Always he loved the smell of oud, that dark bark from far off lands I'd never imagined traveling to, yet I envy the wood of the trees. Cleansed my father with coils of white smoke that can be worn on wrists and necks, breathed in when cheeks are kissed, as it protects the living, and departed in the form of precious oil. And my last poem is the final poem in the book that gives the book the title. This is Arabian Safari in a desert conservation zone. The sun rises before we see the dunes. Then the sun has siblings. Balloons, also red orbs, hang on the horizon. Above and below, we are tourists in this desert and step slowly into cold morning air. And when I say the air is cold, it is cold as a cistern minding its own water. Cold is also like a stone, slowly warming to the touch of us. The air is fresh with smells like fruit turning or earth unturned. All around us, the urine of timid animals. We are the only humans and came to fly falcons. They sit in their own tent, faces covered in burqas. This is the correct Arabic. I hold up a gloved hand for a gyrfalcon to land on, watch her blitz feed on meat, then escape her handler for a date palm. She takes 10 minutes of coaxing to fly back to him and is fed more meat. Another falcon is as lazy as a firstborn son. We breakfast on a carpet spread on sand. The shadows of the trees grow alongside us, young trees, all of them. Cold fruits, croissant with French jam. Over where the falcons train the heads and feet of the dead chicks they couldn't swallow are shallowly buried in the sand, an offering for the foxes that will come by night. I want coffee in finjan from a dalla, my feet tipped in henna. Why did I come to meet the desert with a bare face without gifts? This is Dillman, this is Eden. The falcons journey here for food and are tracked, captured for a season, and released. Such is the call of paradise. Thank you, Cafe Muse.
And thank you, Majda, for sharing your poems that I love so much. I'm honored tonight to introduce Alina Stefanescu, who will be reading from her latest collection, Door. Alina was born in Romania and lives in Birmingham, Alabama, with her partner and several intense mammals. She's the author of 7 collections. Her writing can be found in journals such as Prairie Schooner, North American Review, Southern Humanities Review, Crab Creek Review, and many others. She is a poetry editor for Pigeonholes and for Random Sample Review. She's a poetry reviewer for Up the Staircase Quarterly and co-director of PEN America's Birmingham chapter. 2019. In 2019, she was nominated for 5 pushcart prizes and was a finalist for the 2019 Kurt Brown AWP Prize and won the 2019 River Heron Poetry Prize. Wow. Her latest collection, Door, brings America the gift of the Romanian word door, a word that has no English translations. She defines the word as a complex spiritual experience, a profound longing or sorrow caused by an unfulfilled moment of that longing, as well as the acute awareness of the impossibility of that fulfillment. That one word, door, expresses an entire paragraph, the one I just read before. Door and its derivative forms and their meanings meander throughout the book and pull politics, family, country, love, and culture all together. One of Door's derivatives, the word Dorina, means a Romanian folk song, and it's used to convey the longing for one's place or home. And she tells us, sadly, that UNESCO calls it an endangered musical form threatened by displacement, capitalism, and forgetting. Her book closes with Dornita, a wish, another form of door that includes all others. For example, a wish of a wish, an index of longing. And I love this one, ghost lines of poems removed from the manuscript. Many of her poems speak to us about the dichotomy of her identity. Who am I when I come from one country to another? How do others treat me or smell me when I am the foods my mother cooks? She finds her inspiration everywhere, Bible passages, folklore, history, lines from Kafka, and many more. They are rich with images and words and culture all sewn together by the word door. I can't do justice to the content of her poems, but I can show you the beauty of lines stolen from them. Sometimes a single line from a poem falls on you as if it's a poem itself. Here's one, struggle was not suicide, but its opposite. An effort at life as it lapped at the edge of dying, the near of disappearing. Sunset cannot overcome its habitual marvel. I lie with your bullets to comfort my gun. Quite frankly, I'm astounded by her poems, and I can't say enough, so let's welcome her to read them to us. Welcome, Alina.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to hear and to celebrate Majda's book. I'm going to do something strange, I guess, and read a poem that is an occasional poem in honor of this chapbook. And it's a cento created from lines from Pixies lyrics and poems from, lines also from Majda Gama's The Call of Paradise. It's called So if some of the lines sound familiar, it's because they are. It's called In Virginia, We Drank Lemonade, a cento for Majda. My father came from a city of old rooftops, layered in herbs. He smelled like our land on a wave of mutilation. A lintel above him of pierced woodwork. This is Dilbun. This is Eden, the falcons captured for a season and released with holy fingers. In America, there is a romance that calls for leaving on a white golf cart fitted with many fans. There is a wait so long, my 20s were trance-based. Across the road is a field felled of a tree. I want you to know the urine of timid animals, with your feet in the air and your head on the ground, the red backhoe dirt of Virginia, a land none of us are from. What is the name of the river before me? I carry the east with me. I carry it to the west. I hope the neon pink burns through my mother's door. I'm digging for fire all over the world of two languages to hold her in place. Now there's a hole in the sky, the carcass of arrows, and a letter in your writing doesn't mean you're not dead in the eyes of everything looking back at us. That was just fun. Thank you for letting me write with your poems, and thank you for letting me read with you tonight. Masha, I'm going to read from Dor. I'm going to read directly from the book. Pickled plums. Pickled plums, I dub them, those 3 citizens of my womb, the ones I didn't deport. Although I know plums are hard to grow on foreign soil, plums are finicky, unreliable, quick to revolt or pout. Like my mother, I planted a Romanian plum sapling in the northeast corner of the yard to keep evil away. Like my father, I take 3 thimbles of tsuika before dinner to prepare the throat for what the mouth may say. Tsuika is plum brandy, and the men in Romania each have their own recipes. It's kind of like barbecue. They fight over it. So it's a traditional thing. So dor in Romanian means longing, and it means different things to every Romanian, but it's also a happy longing, kind of like the blues. It can't be fulfilled. You can never get what you want with dor. So in that sense, it is oppositional to the American culture of self-gratification, achievement, accomplishment. To be in dor is to never be able to accomplish. The sky leans over the earth on 4 stilts spun from stars is the title. And this is a Romanian legend, that it's a folk legend that the sky leans on the earth. Begin in a public restroom, forehead flush against concrete. The melody of beige in the hands of a stranger using the sink. Add the soap of no dollop, the sparkle of nope sounds. A good girl poem waits for the bass. The poem is the facts paintball, the burden of verbing. You must write a self out of waiting to speak. The sky is your byline, a blue smudge the god leaves on walls when he's empty. Not even his bigness is free from wanting some skin in the sun you made. I lie with your bullets to comfort your guns. Confess to the wall, the stall, these stars, tilt in relation to truth. There's several fugues in this, so I'm going to read one of them. This is called Improper Fugue, and it's Allegro con fuoco, I guess. Fiery, with fire. Does it irk you that the pool wears a silkier blue at night? Lit from inside, like intimacy, an incandescence edging nearer to the underwater kingdom you imagined before cartoons stamped castles on the vision. Is the problem with light or what we call it when a house intrudes, a barrier holding the moon back from washing the lawn? The city swallows whole stars and exhales them from smokestacks. There was something I wanted from water before you arrived. The wanting was mine. I love the blue, the way I loved the lit pool, its lack full of promise, the impersonal allegiance of longing, anonymous, with no name to face or erase. I think I'm going to read a poem about, I think I probably should warn, it is about abortion. It's called My Polish Child. I lost a child on the streets of Krakow. Somewhere near the center of the square, women queued with pigeons. The ending I wanted was illegal. My cousin came on a train from Romania. Like an accordion winding down a carnival, we tried hard to find the absent word. Loss layered like velvet curtains round our lips. The cathedral held a rat in reserve, its eyes approaching vermilion. I felt a color, not an expression of life. Stones steamed with the imprint of ancient chariots. I crossed my heart, told my cousin, we have always been running, letting the next breath escape. A couple ended an argument under neon. I held tight the ticket. What happened is unlikely to explain. I must have carried it wrong. Then my mother died while I was working on some parts of this book. And this is a poem for her. The epigraph is a line from Donald Hall that struck me. He said, "Lust is grief that has turned over in bed to look the other way." So lust is grief. I could kneel in the hem of his hands, dicing onions for chorba. His version of my mother's soup, softer than her full-bodied original. Like Romanian spoken in a tunnel, its diacritics muffled, strained into diminutives. Something emerges, diminished. The accent on the end of a word like da, the rising pressure of affirmation, the promise to be pleased when I am starved for a feast only the dead can make. Only the absent can feed me, and no desire will match this new knowledge of danger, the unsettled awe of it, which is not like a thimble set against pricking, but closer to the taste of a copper penny given to a beggar, not in passing politeness, but in the urgence of one tongue touching the border of another, leaving only money in his mouth. There are political poems here. So I'll read one of them. This is Liberty Leading the People, after the famous painting by Eugene Delacroix. And it's a little bit, the painting of the woman, I think it's a famous French painting that symbolizes their republic, I guess. Some of these poems were written during a dark political time, though it's been pretty dark here for a while, I think. Liberty Leading the People. The bulb beneath the bridge is broken. It hangs from a pole, unfixed, unresolved, ribald as foreplay French. When I say never mistake a poem for an etude, I mean depravity wears rain boots in April. I mean, I found a toy accordion, but prayers still can't shorten the accident's life or seam the scar's rotten memory. We remember for money the lips of the fathers, the lies of the sons, the cold lache of marble counters under my palm, the knife opening the eyes of leaks. A man without a home or family knows the rich lie of our liberalism. I share this wine freely with friends, but the mouth wants chocolate. The mouth wants bayonet and bonnet, bodice fallen to the waist. And I think, I don't know how I'm doing on time. I wanted to read the last poem, which I've never read anywhere. It's Dorința. So it's a sort of self-cento, and it comes from the Romanian word. Dorința means wish, dor is longing. So they're kind of connected in an interesting way. So I'm going to try and save time for that. A lustration. So lustrare in Romania and in some of the post-socialist states was, the word lustration is the title of this. And in politics, lustration refers to the restoration of a government's credibility by the purging of perpetrators who committed crimes under an earlier regime. So this meant this meant in Romania and Czech Republic and Poland, there were a lot of discussions over who had power before and whether they should be allowed to have power again. So lustrate comes from the Latin verb meaning purification by sacrifice, the process of making clear or pure by means of a propitiatory offering. So a lustration, which is a true story about Dor. Inside every word hides an argument, a jury of dim alleys. The wind it was, the trash lids percussed. A choir of oak limbs bore witness to the lustration of Dor's first body. One trembling matchstick, my hand in the night of it, knowing longing grows stronger in withholding its initial draft. The cloud mass that wanted to rain met its match in the lack. The manuscript's cremains, softer than lover's skin after sex, I tucked them in to her wooden box, a mountain carved over the top. See, we could not arrive without a fire, you and I, without burning a book to bring this one to life. The luster monster of ash shelved, the book stacked near an urn with mom in it. And I'm going to read Dorința, I think, as the last one. It's dark in my house. Dorința. So it's a cento of lines that were included and of some of the poems I took out at the last minute, but there's the ghost lines, as Renee mentioned. I lay my head on the map that can't hold me. The sky is a desert with a stone in his mouth. The light of the world is my heart in the word revolution, lying sideways. My soul limbs an un-American, fluent in doubt. We come from the dreams of small children, feeling scarecrow, knowing empty, eating Legos to make a point about pointlessness. The bravest babies fight cocks and bold roaches for breadcrumbs near the beak's crunch, past the mountainous molehill. I have a poor spirit, I told the beer named after a bear as Lyndons staggered through the crypt. Dear Alabama, please stop burning my hope work. Dear son, the babas are haloed by brambles. One version of lonely in the bluegrass of fist bumps, the hot punk of eye rolls, the innocent blizzard. The problem with writing is everything looks terrible dying. And the poem wants the bodice, the church, the steeple. The dictator lies on the lips of those who served him. Things we carried grow heavy enough to hurt when they leave. Losing is belief in its bewilderments. With diatoms for eyes, I keep myself curled in italics. Nourish this lie on the lawn, the hush between falling and freezing. I was thinking of the ghost, that bow-legged buttercup, that meter of interior mystery. The danger is not dying, but living in exile from longing, from knowing the name of what is gone. Each frack or fuck on the planet seeks a mermaid, each love a book or a wren. I took off my dress for his shadow in the origin of roses. The poem is the fact's paintball. The sunflower's head hangs from the stem. The noun possesses what was felt without owning the chair. The sky blesses the boots I've worn to stomp out of the house I've become under neon. Lit from inside, I ladle ashes from the luster monster's mouth. My hands are magnolias, sparrow vespers, oak limbs. The fugue of me cannot stop the fire. All hurt is American carnage. The skulls fake it to make it work. Thank you so much for letting me read and for having me.
And thank you, Alina. I do think we have enough time for some questions and answers. Karen?
Yes. Actually, I'd like to do something that I don't usually do, and that is I would like an encore. So I want Majda to pick a poem that maybe you were thinking of reading, but you didn't read, or a poem that you read that you feel you want that to be the last thing that people will remember, and Alina for you to do the same. And then we can talk about a question. So Majda, what do you have?
I'm jumping in. That cento was, I think, the best thing I have ever heard in my entire life. And I'm still kind of reeling from that, but I will read a poem that David Klinger had mentioned. It's about my father, and it takes its title from an Edvard Grieg classical song, In the Hall of the Mountain King. It's a prose poem. My father came from a city of old rooftops sprawled across 7 hills. Within these hills were tribal gods carved into metamorphic rock. When he built us a home, that home was new and imported. Veined marble tiles from Italy, wood furniture from the hollows of North Carolina. He loved what was new, but filled our home with polished rocks from deep within the fossil record. They spoke their language to him. His head was always cocked as if listening. We often sat around the diamond tip on the needle of his record flare, listening to Peer Gynt. He pursued the perfection of sound. Heavy, blinking compact disc player, hidden away from visitors in a dedicated room. He'd shut himself in to listen to Mozart on a silver disc. Stood in the middle of the room to conduct St. Martin's in the Fields. A few months after he passed away, my mother fished into the pocket of a coat he wore when traveling to the West. She pulled out a packet of cut diamonds. Thank you.
I love that one. I think I'm going to read one that's not in Dor, and I don't remember where this was published. It's published somewhere, in some place that I'm very grateful to. It's called The Mother Test No One Talks About. Perhaps the flocks needs pinching, I tell another mother, as we circle each other for hints, as we drop favorite punk bands like crumbs on the porch of possible friending, as we pause near the door to gauge intent, to fathom postures on traditional marriage, as we test the word feminist, flex it like thigh muscles developed for running away, in case we outgrow the house-shaped box and the family that stuns us, in case we scorch the angel food cupcakes, in case we open our mouths and secrets bond us like pansies in potted cement.
I was betting with myself about whether or not you would each pick a poem that contained references to music, and there it was. Voila. It was my theory that that's the question that had to be posed, and that is, you know, the importance of music to you in your work. And I mean, it manifests in different ways for each of you. So I would like you to talk a little bit about the importance of music in your work or in poetry in general, whatever strikes you as being the right thing to say. Majda.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. I realized quite recently that I probably taught myself narrative from singer-songwriters, and I do a lot of writing while listening to music at the same time. I just let that sort of feed into each form, feed into the other, but I just feel like my poetry life and my music life are sort of very interchangeable, and I have had a life in music, and so I needed to incorporate that into my poetry, or I wouldn't be honest about how I form a lyric line in a poem.
I feel very similar, or similarly to Majda in relation to music. For me, so much poetry comes out of music. In this book, in Dor, some of the poems that were written during pandemic, my son is a pianist and he was playing a lot of fugues, and it literally changed the line in some of these poems. And we would get into these conversations about music theory, where he would talk about the theme and he would talk about the fugue line. And you know, there was this constant exchange, you know, between us, and this sort of, I don't know, motion between the two different mediums. And it's deeply involved in how I write. There's a lot of strangely music theory to it, but there's also a lot of, when I listen to music, it makes me want to write. It's difficult for me to imagine not feeling a tremendous amount when I listen to music. I'm not good at background music. Concerts and some of those moments in my early days were the moments when I felt most alive somehow. And I think that there's a relationship between that particular aliveness and the aliveness of the poem, the risk that it takes, just the sort of throbbing, pulsing presence, that, you know, the moment of that. So music is everything to me, and I'm teaching another class on poetry and music soon, I think. So I'm excited about that. It's fun.
Well, I'm glad that that question, you know, occurred to me, because we really learned a lot in hearing your two answers, because behind your poetry is this great sea of music in both cases. So it's really quite wonderful. since we have still a little more time, I was wondering if you both could talk about coming from another culture in terms of your background and what that means to you and your poetry, and how it sets you uniquely to yourselves. You know, this is not usual in the American landscape. We have lots of immigration. We know, you know, that we come from other places, but to have, you know, these direct connections to other lands, it's an interesting place to come from. Majda, thanks.
Thank you, Karen. That is, well, I'll speak for myself, but I do think that Alina, rather spookily, is kind of similar here, but it's wonderful to grow up with multiple languages in a house. But I spent a lot of my life between two countries, in two countries constantly. And so you do this sort of code switching, and you develop a different ear, I think. I definitely, the first poetry I ever heard was in Arabic. It was Quran being recited, and I recited it by memorizing it for a good 6 years of my life. And so I just feel very grateful to the fact that when I write in English, as I do write in English, sometimes I throw in some Arabic words. I know that I'm also hearing a poem in my head in another language. And so the poem for me is an act of constant translation. Most poems are translations because we're tapping into, allow me to be spiritual here, we're tapping into, you know, the ether a little bit, I think, at least I am. So when I write any poem, even if it's about punk, and I wouldn't be the American I am without punk rock music. I even write that poem translating it from the Arabic me, so to speak. And that's, I think, it's not a binary, as David said. It's not a binary. It's everything, everywhere, all at once. I guess it's happening. So thank you.
I think that's a great point about it not being a binary. It's difficult to describe how it's constantly coexisting in the self. You know, it's a binary when you're dealing with the world, right? When you're code switching, when you're trying to be aware of what people don't know about your country, and, you know, not judging people for that, because you too were raised in America, you too went to American schools, you know what you were taught, and it wasn't that much about the world. So you can't really judge others for that, right? But it's also, there's a pain, there's a sort of hurt, I think, that you can't have, you know, that I wish I had a larger Romanian community. I wish that, you know, my mom were alive because I spoke Romanian to her every day. I miss the intimacy of Romanian. It will always be for me the language in which the true things are said and love is spoken. Whereas American is more performative. It's more the language you try to get a visa in. It's the language that you have to win in. And Romanian was sort of the language that I was born into, right? It's the one that they spoke at home. So that's a sort of constant dialogue between languages for me. But I think what's really strange when I'm looking at poetry and when I'm thinking about language more generally is how you can't ever really win with either side. In Romania, you're the one who left and lives in the US. In the South, you're that really suspicious, probably Russian, right, person, because a lot of people in the South thought Romania was Russian when I was growing up. So, you know, you're constant, and you see the nationalism in both countries, and it's repulsive, at least for me. You know, it's difficult to identify because you can never belong completely. You also don't identify in many ways with the extremes of nationalism that appear politically. And I think that that's a gift, right? But I can also say that there are some people that do, in fact, try to become even more uber nationalist in order to, or wave the flag harder in order to prove their value as immigrants. And I think I have studied that in my parents' generation. And I know where it comes from. It comes from fear. And so judgment is more complicated. And the binaries don't function as well, I think, for me, given my mixedness.
Okay, this is one final question, which I don't expect you'll have much to say, except maybe, yes or no. But I was wondering if you plan or have already written in Romanian, Alina, or in Saudi. Is that the proper language? What is the language? Arabic, Majda? Have you written in the other language your poetry? I know you write in English, but have you attempted writing in the other language, in a really extended form? Majda.
Yeah, that's the dream. I actually have one poem that I wrote. One line is in English and one line is in Arabic, but I used 21st century version of written Arabic that has been used on the internet, where it's spelled with numbers and letters. So it's like a new kind of Arabic language. So I've been experimenting with that, because it's how the younger generation reads Arabic now. I grew up with a lot of ornate Fusha dialect that is very common in Saudi Arabia. And the dialects change constantly, depending on where you go. And internet Arabic is a new dialect, and I want to speak it.
Wow.
That's fascinating about the internet dialect. That is so exciting. And I'm glad that you mentioned dialects, because it is really true that there are, dialects in Romania as well, and accents and, different ways, different intonations that change the language and the way that it's said, and spoken and heard and made music of, or made musically. I do and have written in Romanian. I've translated some of my poems in Romanian, and there's some sections in the book that I was working on that I wrote in Romanian first, because I wanted to capture sort of the child language. So the world to me as a child is all in Romanian. My memories are in Romanian. So it's sort of the first take, I guess, on the world, before it got messy and complicated, is in that language. And so sometimes when I'm thinking of child voices, or when I'm trying to reach into the uncanny juxtapositions that a child perspective brings, I will write in Romanian first, because that is that's what comes to me. It comes quicker than in English. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Absolutely. That answers it. Thank you both. It was wonderful talking with you. Wonderful hearing your poetry. We had an exciting evening, and I think we all learned some new things tonight. And I'm turning it back to Renee. Thank you, Renee. And thank you, Henry, and everyone who has come tonight.
And indeed, we did learn some things tonight and enjoyed it. And unfortunately, we've come to the end of our program. But on behalf of Cafe Muse, I want to thank Majda and Alina for their stunning poems, for sharing them with us. And we also, on that note, please buy our poets' books. We encourage you to do that. Poetry doesn't pay that well. So we've put a link in the chat for you to purchase their books, and also for you to donate to Cafe Muse reading series to help us keep this going and bring it to you on Monday nights. Join us Monday, November 6th, 2023, where we'll be featuring David Keplinger. and Dorianne Lau, two other wonderful poets. So in between readings, check us out on Facebook, YouTube, or our website. And I want to thank everyone who made this evening possible. My co-host, David Keplinger, and all of our other co-hosts behind the scenes, Ellen Cole, Henry Crawford, Majda Gama, Luther Jett, Claire McGough, and of course, Cafe Muse founder, Karen Alanier. Also, let's not forget Michael Davis, who performed classical guitar, and Henry for your photos and your behind the scene technology. We'd be lost without you. So in closing, on behalf of Cafe Muse, we thank you all for joining us. Without you, we wouldn't be here. Stay safe, be well, and good night.